Hey folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things, and I get a lot of people asking me to make a cursed Thomas the Tank Engine, which always seemed a bit strange to me until I saw a game called Choo Choo Charles, which has an old-timey train that's also a demonic spider, and I thought, yeah, okay, fine. Now, if I'm gonna make a possessed spooter train, then I should probably start with the train itself, which I've mentally broken down into 3 sections that I'll build separately then attach together towards the end. The first section will be the tubey bit at the front, which I'll make by wrapping a flat sheet of clay around a cardboard tube, then I'll do the same thing with a slightly larger metal camping coffee cup. It gets its own little grey clay scarf wrapped around it, then smooshed out and rolled flat before both pieces go into the oven to lock it in shape. Once they've cooled down, I can pop out the inserts and I'm left with 2 kinda gnarly looking clay pipes, which could probably do with a little sandpaper ASMR. Once I've got some nice smooth sides, I can then add a cap on one end. I'll then add some fat or trim to the ends by adding some oversized flat wormy dealies that I can cut down to the correct width before tossing it all in the oven and taking another quick ASMR break. Finally, I've got my tubes finished and I can get to the spooky spider face on the front. Or I mean, I guess it's not really a spider face at all. Instead, it's really just a horrifying Thomas face, which I think we can all agree is only slightly worse than the non-cursed version. Now, Choo Choo Charles has about 1 billion teeth, and the thought of trying to paint around all those teeth once they've been pressed into place makes me sad. So to save myself a whole lot of heartache, I've mixed up a batch of burgundy red fleshy mouth clay that I'll line the inside of his mouth with, thereby bypassing any need to paint the inside of his mouth at all. Then I can press some baking bead eyeballs into place and get to work building up the lumpy, wrinkly Toot Toot Thomas face. Finally, once the front of my train is looking like if it and Voldemort had a baby with a penchant for poorly applying lipstick, I can start to stick his cornucopia of teeth in place. Now, much like the inside of his mouth, to avoid having to paint anything, I've made the teeth by rolling teeny tiny wormy dealies of translucent clay into various sizes of teeny tiny toothy dealies. Then I'll gussy up the lips a little bit and I can glue the little tube into place on the bigger tube before drilling a pair of strategically placed blowholes to fit my pre-baked safety valves onto. Finally, to mount my double tube face in place, I made a set of 4 tapered clay mounts that I can squish the whole contraption onto. Otherwise, that's the first part done, so I can get to work on the spider train's abdomen. The spider train's butt is a boxy square box at the back which, like most square boxes, has 4 equal sides, so I've made a single sheet of clay that I can then use to make a matching foursome. A little super glue will hold all the pieces together, then I can fill in the bottom and give the whole thing a nice smooth sanding to remove any of the gross imperfections. I'll make the edge banding in the same way I made the tube details by adding an oversized flatworm of clay and cutting it to width. And then a long wormy dealie, flattened and smoothed out, will make my door frame for the box. Finally, I can add a little bit of extra detail like some stairs and horizontal braces before topping the entire thing off with a lovely curved roof. Otherwise, that's 2 sections down and 1 left, which means it's time to make the bottom connecty bit. This is made out of a couple pieces of clay that I've chopped down to the correct size so that I can glue them together in a similar fashion to the boxy back part of the train. Then I'll fill in all the gaps with a bit more clay, then once it's been baked, I can sand all the sides flat. Then I can add all the trim and detail. Now at this point you may be wondering why I've made the entire thing out of clay rather than just making it out of cardboard tubes and foam. Well, beyond the obvious reason that I prefer working with clay, the biggest reason was that with an entire body built out of grey clay, I don't have to prime anything so I can get straight to the painting once the body is finished. Of course, it does mean that this entire thing weighs substantially more than a cardboard and foam body would, but that's a problem for future Adam to realize when it's far too late to make any changes. For now though, all my sections are finished and I've run some wiring for the front lights so I can finally glue each of the pieces in place. Now with the top tubes attached, I can finally get to adding my greeblies. I figured an old-timey train like this is going to have an awful lot of visible fasteners, so I'll make myself a big pile of them using some liquid clay and a silicone mold. Now I bought this particular mold years ago thinking it would see constant use, but this is probably only the second time I've actually remembered to use it. That being said, it does exactly what it's supposed to, and I'm left with a whole bunch of uniformly sized little clay bolts ready to be glued in place. Now with my bolts in place, I can cap the safety valves and add the horns to the side of the box before getting to work drilling some of the holes for my legs. The bones of the legs will be made out of some armature wire which will eventually be glued in place, but for the time being I want them to be removable so that I can add the clay on top and bake them separately. For now though, I can support the bottom of the train while I bend the legs into the position I want. It's also at this point that I realized just how heavy the clay body is, so I ended up replacing half of the wire with significantly thicker wire in the hopes that Charles will be able to stand unsupported. Then I can take the legs out, set them aside, tape off his face, and get to work laying down the blood red base coat.
Hello.
And once the base coat is dried, I'll come back and paint the roof and frame black. Then a half dozen coats of white will give Charles a sickly white complexion, and that's the base coats finished, so I can get to work adding the finer details. I'll start with some steel streaks to give the train a bit of a well-worn look, followed by a darker red tinted steel on all the bolts and rivets. Back to the face, I'll give Charles's eyes a grey to white gradient, then I can start to slap on the various bloody streaks using a thick blood red wash. I'll make sure to paint as much of the mouth as is easily accessible and add lots of drippy bits and splatters all over his unsettlingly white horror clown train face. Then, once the face is looking, well, like it looks now, I'll tickle the roots of all the teeth with a thin sepia wash so they have a bit of a fresh, coffee-stained look. Now before I add the final layer of grime and grease, I'll give the entire surface a coat of high-gloss varnish. This will help it look a little more metallic, as well as give the subsequent brown wash a smoother surface to, well, not adhere to. Basically, I want this wash to be streaky and runny, and the smooth varnished surface means it's less likely to pool on the flat surfaces and should leave me with a pretty gnarly finish. Finally, with the painting finished, I can snip the excess wire off the front, stick a little LED in place, then fill in the remainder of the void with hot glue. Once it cures, it'll be slightly opaque and works wonders as an old dirty lamp. Which means the only thing left to do is make my legs. To make said legs, I'll take those pre-formed aluminium robo spider legs and wrap them in a great big wormy dealy. Then I can add some bigger blobs on in between the bends to make my spider knuckles, adding some fancy little cuts in the middle before running my ball styluses along the surface to add some spooky spider leg texture. To make the join between the train and the leg, I'll wrap a bit of plastic wrap over the train before pressing the leg into the leg hole. The plastic wrap will let me press the clay into the train to make a form-fitting surface, but it'll also allow me to remove it without making it stick to the paint. Then I can bake my leg in the oven, repeat this process 7 more times, then get to sticking a full set of spider legs in place. Finally, I'll give the legs a quick once-over with a thick black ink to add a bit of shading, and I'll tickle the tips with a dark red dry brush to add some highlighting. Last but not least, as a final touch, I made a little set of train wheels that I'll glue to the underside, and with them in place, we're all finished here and onto the glamour shots. As always, a big ol' thank you to my wonderful patrons and a very special shout out to my newest patrons, Jeff King Jr., Casey Johnson, Jared Pointing, Hatter Minor, Lord Germadin's Mum, Lord Troutinator, Your Favorite Queer, Jake DeZeus, Ashley Elizabeth, MEC, Dion Ice Cream Logue, Mama Dragon 990218, Chicky44, and Frickin' Bats. You are the spindly yet surprisingly robust spooky spider legs that help to support the possessed red engine that is this channel. We're tantalizingly close to that 1 million subscriber mark, and if we can hit that before the end of the year, well, I don't think anything would actually happen, but it would be pretty neat. So don't subscribe to forget and like that smash notification. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.